Welcome to Sarder TV. I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick. Our studio guest is the newly appointed CEO of the YWCA-USA, Alejandra Castillo. She's also a highly regarded political leader who's worked on 5 presidential campaigns. In addition, she's the recipient of numerous awards and accolades for her work in public service, including the National Urban League's Woman of Power Award. Alejandra, thank you so much for traveling up from Washington, D.C. to talk with us today.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm so delighted. I know we're going to have a wonderful conversation.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how it helped you achieve becoming the CEO of the YWCA-USA.
Well, I'm a native of New York. My parents are immigrants from the Dominican Republic, and I think that growing up in New York in an immigrant community really tested my mettle. I was curious about economics and the underground economy and political science, and just curious overall. And my journey has been a professional journey of many experiences. I worked on the Hill, started off with Senator Kennedy, moved to the House of Representatives, worked for EPA, worked for the White House under Clinton, worked as a lawyer, and then led the Hispanic National Bar Association. Again, went back to public service, and now I'm in the nonprofit world, and it's fantastic.
So the YWCA has been helping women and children. You're now approaching your 160th anniversary. Talk about some of the new challenges you'll be facing as the new CEO, especially in this current political climate.
And as you well pointed out, we are reaching a critical milestone, 160 years. Not every organization gets to be 160. And I think as we celebrate our journey of 160 years, I don't want to look back. I really want to make sure that we are futuristic. What will the YWCA mean in a 21st century economy? What type of services must we deliver to women and girls at every stage of their lives to really be productive, to ensure health and safety, to ensure that we're eliminating racism, and to ensure that we're empowering women? So we have a lot of wonderful programs that we will be launching in 2018 as part of this milestone. But I also want to recognize we have 215 associations around the country that are doing tremendous work day in and day out, not just for women and girls, but for communities. So I'm excited about that. And I want to make sure that everyone knows exactly what the YWCA stands for.
Did you have any role models or mentors growing up?
Success without mentors and role models, I don't think it's achievable. So I had, I still have, amazing mentors, whether they're my professors or they're dear friends that have been with me for 25 years, or they're individuals that are in the workplace, but also high school friends, people who keep you true, who call you out, who make sure that you are true to your values. And then individuals that we meet across the journey that inspire you. In my case, I'm a reader, so I love everything from Maya Angelou to people who are blogging, individuals who pique my interest. But again, I have to underscore, in these times, we need to make sure that we understand what our values are and how we live them.
Have you experienced sexism or racism in your career? And if so, how have you dealt with it?
I have, both, and they've been very subtle. So as a lawyer, it's nothing that you can put your finger on. It's the subtlety that sometimes burns even deeper. Sexism in Washington, D.C., unfortunately, is very much alive. The Boys Network, whether you're in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector, or in the government. It's that network of information that sometimes, as a woman, you never get to be privy to. It's that gathering or a meeting that's being called that you are not part of. It's being part of a project or being overlooked for it. And sometimes it's that promotion that you know you deserve that you still have to prove yourself. So I've encountered many of those. The way I've confronted them is particularly head-on, making sure that individuals know what my track record is, making sure that individuals understand, particularly my supervisors or individuals in power, know what I bring to the table, and knowing your value, knowing your worth, and making sure that you're never stepping on anyone, but that you're bringing along a group of individuals, because people will always root for you. when you are that team player that's always advocating for the benefit of the organization.
Now, looking back on when these things did happen to you, is there anything now you would do differently that you didn't do back then while it was occurring?
Sure. As a younger woman, I would sulk in my pain sometimes. I think when you bring in other individuals to help you think it through, to have a board of directors that are telling you what you need to do, when you need to do it, and how you need to do it. So never sitting by yourself and trying to understand what the answer to this puzzle is. I'm a big believer that you need a community, particularly as a woman, to help you walk through these challenges.
How have you tried to affect change in your organization and encourage leadership roles for women?
So one of the things I brought to the YWCA was to challenge my current team to think entrepreneurially. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make a profit out of every endeavor. What that means is that you're being innovative, that you're thinking differently, that you're trying to bring along new stakeholders, new organizations that can also pull us up, to think, to try things and to fail fast, as the story goes, to know that I will back them up when they take risks, so long as they are doing their due diligence. So making sure that my team understands that I'm here to expand their knowledge, but also to expand the service that we render as the YWCA. That the service that we render is not just the same thing that we've been doing for many years, but that it's actually meeting the needs of a 21st century community. You know, never would we think that making sure that we deliver tech education was something in our purview. And yet we know that unless we include technology and innovation as part of our service delivery, we're not ensuring that the community is ready for a 21st century economy or a 21st century workforce. So these are the type of expanded thought processes that I'm bringing into the YWCA-USA.
How do you keep your employees motivated, and are they comfortable challenging you? Or you haven't experienced that yet since you are newly appointed?
No, I've experienced it. Yeah. They're comfortable challenging me. I just want to make sure that it's not for the sake of challenging me, but for the sake of making sure that our work product is better, for the sake of pursuing excellence. How do I motivate them? When they take on a project, they take the accolades, they take the recognition. I'm just a bystander. I'm just a spokesperson for the organization. But I want them to own it in all of its facets. Whether they succeed or they fail, we own it together. And I want to make sure that they have the spotlight, because that's how teams are willing to take that extra hour, extra day, extra amount of energy to really take a product from just good to really being excellent.
What are the organizational, interpersonal, and individual barriers for women's advancement?
I think in part, I alluded to something in a previous question, and that's you're never an island. And at times, it is possible for women to feel a certain way and to take our toys and sulk in it and allow the space to others because we've felt injured. I want to invite women, when you feel injured, that's the moment that you have to engage the most. And we've heard it in different iterations. Some people call it lean in. Some people may call it other things. I call it, that's the moment that you really have to show that you are a team player. And making sure that you are consulting. Ask yourself, what could I have done differently? Ask others, how could this project had a different outcome? Being inquisitive and at times being productively introspective is important. And I'm not suggesting that you're going to beat yourself up. What I'm suggesting is that you take the time to assess and to think, okay, here's where I stand right now. What does the landscape look like? What different approaches must I take on? What other skill sets do I need to bring to the table? And being productive enough to look at that in a constructive manner.
Now, many of the issues that minority women face are rooted in sexism and abusive behavior by men. Do you bring men into the conversation at the YWCA to try and end the cycle?
We're trying to. At least at the YWCA-USA, we have men in our team, and I want to bring more men into this conversation. We cannot be drivers of change if we're just one-sided. These are issues that impact women disproportionately. But the solution to these issues is going to require us to walk hand in hand with our male counterparts. So that is an exercise that I'm definitely very committed to. I grew up with a lot of men in my family, a lot of Latin men. And as the firstborn in the United States and as the first of my generation, I was lucky to have a father who brought me to the table and to the conversation. So I treasure that, and I never want to be one to discriminate against men because this is an issue that impacts women. On the contrary, I want to make sure that I walk the walk and that we set the example, not just for the men of this time, but the young men that are coming up. So I will tell you that our YWCAs have this conversation ongoing. I recently was at the YWCA in Brooklyn, and it was a very interesting conversation about the way women experience catcalling and how they felt. And the audience was filled with young men who engaged in the conversation. And it was beautiful to see that aha moment when they understood, I too am part of this problem. So this is the beauty of engaging a much broader audience when we talk about women and girls in America.
Ever since the Me Too movement, that people are really afraid to engage with women, do you think that's going to have a negative impact on us?
Life is about shades of gray. And when the pendulum swings so quickly to the other extreme, you have unintended consequences. And I think that the conversation has to rest somewhere in the middle. And it has to be a dialogue. The Me Too movement has been extraordinary. It has shed light on issues that for a long time, we just kind of had to bear with them. And I'll tell you, as somebody whose professional life was in Washington, D.C., yeah, there were many unspoken rules and situations. It has, the Me Too movement has given power sometimes to those of us who felt powerless. But as we journey through that process, we have to engage in that shade of gray. Not everything can be perceived as a harassment. And we can't allow men to just shut down. That's the other side. We have to bring them out and say, you know what, let's have this conversation. We can have this conversation among colleagues, and we may have to find a point where we will agree to disagree. But we have to struggle through this because it's new norms, it's change, and it's definitely a very needed conversation.
Are you hopeful that 21st century technology will have a positive impact on marginalized women and girls? And how is the YWCA leveraging this technology for those in need?
Well, I love technology and innovation. I have a social science background. I'm more of an economist, lawyer, but I love technology and innovation, and it is a game changer. At the YWCA, we are launching our STEM E3, which is STEM education, STEM employment, and STEM entrepreneurship. I really believe that you can learn technology and innovation. For example, I follow fintech, financial technology, on my Twitter account. I've learned so much about not just Bitcoin, but blockchain and financial technology writ large. I think that right now with social media, it is a tool for learning. And I think that leveraging technology should not be something that we're afraid of, but something that we embrace and that we learn about. Will there be displacement of workers? Absolutely. And we need to be very mindful of that. Automation is already displacing workers. The question that we should have as leaders, as thought leaders, as decision makers is, how do we leverage technology to create more jobs? And that's why our piece also has entrepreneurship. I think that with the leveraging of technology, more women can start new businesses in the STEM field by marrying not just market needs, but how technology can democratize how you deliver services. So I'm a big believer that technology can unleash new entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, and really service underserved communities that could not have access to goods and services, but thanks to technology may now be able to get those services into their communities in a timely manner with better quality. So I love technology, and I think that it is on us to think about how do we bring technology to create jobs for the future.
So give us an example of how you've leveraged social media platforms to your advantage at the YWCA. Is there a case study you can share with us?
Sure. We have embarked on a very ambitious advocacy campaign. And when we talk about advocacy, we are talking about not just advocating on the Hill, but advocating with decision makers that may be national decision makers, state decision makers, local decision makers. Leveraging technology in terms of advocacy to inform people on the ground of how actions in Washington are impacting their lives, not just today, but having a long-term impact. I will tell you, the healthcare advocacy reform that we produced with the Affordable Health Care Act, making sure that people just did not find themselves confused about the acronyms, whether it's Obamacare or ACA, but taking them to the next level. How does the changes to the ACA impact the way you receive your medicine, the way women receive their health care? Who's deciding on a woman's health priorities? So these are the type of advocacy priorities that we have leveraged social media, whether it's our Facebook, our Instagram, our Twitter accounts, whether it's just using technology to make sure that this information is reaching our YWCA associations and that they can then become agents of change in their respective communities. So I'm excited about the social media platforms that we have and expanding those to other reaches.
Tell us how you define your goals and measure success.
So Tracy, you know that right now we're living in this moment of Facebook and Instagram, and you see a lot of pictures of events and gatherings. That's one metric, where we are and who we're with. But the real metric of change does not lie on that, just on that moment of a picture. The real metric of change is, can we get into a legislative action before it hits the floor? Can we educate staffers and members of Congress that perhaps their approach to certain legislation is not the right one, and highlight the impact, the unintended consequences that they may not have seen because of what the basis of knowledge that we have, because we know the on-the-ground impact. That's the type of effective change that I like to see more of and that I want to measure. Funding. Are our YWCAs chasing dollars, or are we actually directing funding opportunities to them because of the great work that they do on domestic violence? That we're able to identify funding for more housing for survivors of domestic violence. That we're actually trying to make sure that the dollars that are flowing are not dollars that are just responding to the fad of the moment, but that they're actually reaching goals. You know, we talked about technology and innovation. Well, technology and innovation, it doesn't stop at coding. It's more than that. So being able to educate funders to where those dollars should be, and seeding, making sure that they make investments early on to new ideas, because the nonprofit world is changing, and so is the philanthropic world. So these are all metrics that I want to make sure that we are measuring social impact, not just charitable giving.
Is it difficult getting young graduates that are heavily in debt to get involved in the not-for-profit world?
It is very difficult. You know, I have met so much amazing talent that are coming out of our educational system, four-year colleges or graduate school, that are seeing $250,000 of debt. It is truly impossible to meet their loan repayment, particularly what the banks are asking them, through the nonprofit world. We have to make room for that type of debt, whether it's loan forgiveness programs or making sure that we work closely with the banks to make sure that there is some at least some softening of that debt if they're in the nonprofit world. You know, as when I came out of law school, I knew that if I worked in a public interest law environment, my school had a loan forgiveness program. I'd love to fund something along those lines. And that's why when I spoke about educating funders in the philanthropic world, that's the type of ideas that we need to bring to our funders and say, can you seed a program like this if we recruited more new graduates into the YWCA and they committed to working at the YWCA in their local communities or at the YWCA-USA. These are the type of ideas and programs that I'm hopeful I can find a very generous funder to undertake, because it is painful to watch really young talent that want to contribute into the nonprofit world, and begrudgingly they're taking private sector jobs because that's the only way they can pay for their loans. So there's a need and there's a talent gap that nonprofits need to consider, but that the banks and that funders need to also consider. So I'm hoping I'm going to find some new partners in this endeavor.
So what has been one of your most successful outreach programs to date?
You know, I've been on the job to date for 3 months, but I'm a big believer in partnerships. I am a big believer that there is no need to reinvent the wheel. What I have noticed is that in the nonprofit world, there are many nonprofits doing fantastic work. We just need to do more strategic alliances. We need to do more public-private partnerships, and to make sure that we put our egos to the side. And this is not about the ego of the organization, but how do we really impact social change? I have found some wonderful partners, individuals who are willing to walk with us and to engage in new ideas. So I'm hopeful that in our 160th anniversary, you're going to see some interesting partnerships, whether it's with other women organizations or whether it's with organizations that are working with young men overall. So I'm trying to change that landscape so that we don't trip on each other, but that we can actually find some synergy by collaborating and cooperating with one another.
How have the societal issues of women and girls changed over the last several decades?
It's interesting because, as the saying goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So much has changed, but there are some core issues that still remain the same. And I think that, as we referenced before, the Me Too movement, that has been a startling reminder that issues regarding the behavior of individuals in the workplace, while they are not so blatantly open, they still exist. So we need to make sure that we do a deep dive in terms of what are the lingering cultural issues that women and girls face, whether it's harassment in the workplace, whether it's domestic violence, which is still very prevalent in our country. How do we address them? What are the consequences that individuals who engage in this type of behavior should face? What are the shades of gray in these areas? But at the end of the day, I think that we still have a lot of work to do to support women, to make sure that their confidence is up, to give them more opportunities to expand their areas of knowledge, to open up the boardrooms for more women's voices to be heard. So I'm confident that while we still have a long way to go, it's beautiful to see the amount of work that's being done. And at the YWCA, we are very proud of the work that we've been doing for 160 years. So our body of knowledge is so deep and rich in terms of what still needs to be done, and we're ready to continue to work on this. Our Week Without Violence is a signature program that we continue to do to raise awareness of domestic violence. But we are also raising awareness internationally. The YWCA has been an organization that has been part of the UN Commission on the Status of Women since it started in 1947. And we gather here in Washington, D.C. to make sure that the YWCA-USA continues to have a voice not just in the US, but also globally. So I'm excited of what the future lies.
Is there a magic bullet that can help marginalized women become self-sustained, independent members of society?
I don't believe in magic bullets. I think magic bullets can actually lead to some fallacies. But I do believe that there are many ways to confront and to address how marginalized women or underserved women can be brought in to the fold. And it has to be strategic, and it has to be multi-pronged, but it also has to be sustainable, and it has to be consistent. What I find sometimes is that we can go in and try to put a nice Band-Aid. It'll work for a few months, maybe a few years, but the underlying issues are never addressed. Magic bullets tend to distract us from doing the hard work. And one of the work that we tend to do at the YWCA, which is core to our mission, is eliminating racism. And by eliminating racism, we attack the core problems of racism in America, but also sexism, because it is core to our mission. We have multiple programs that bring women of color, but that also bring the broader society to know and understand what some of these issues are. And they can be as broad as continued discrimination, discrimination in education, discrimination in the workplace, and discrimination in terms of our pay. So pay equity is something that not just impacts women, unfortunately it disproportionately impacts women of color. But making sure that we talk about pay equity at every level, not just for professional women, but for working women overall. So I'm excited again that these are issues that are core, but that we're attacking them from a multi-pronged and multi-level approach.
How do you help develop leaders within your organization, and what leaders do you admire?
You know, we work with leadership development, and it's interesting because we have YWCAs that have taken on the issue of developing leadership, women leaders to run for office. We have YWCAs that are taking on the issues of developing young women leaders, not just on campuses, but in communities. We have YWCAs that are working to develop leaders in the workplace. And again, I raise that because we have 215 YWCAs that are responsive in many ways to the needs of their respective community. Now at the YWCA-USA, we want to lift up those extraordinary programs. And as we approach our 160th anniversary, our civic participation program is something that I want to make sure that we elevate, so that we talk about women leadership in the workplace, in communities, as well as in the highest office of government. So we're excited in terms of our civic participation because women have a tremendous voice, not just in the ballot box, but a voice in terms of advocacy at their local communities and in the halls of Congress. So developing women leadership is core to our mission as well. Women leaders that I admire stand from a Sonia Sotomayor in our judiciary, or somebody like a Lily Ledbetter who advocated for equal pay and pay equity, or individuals like I would say my own family, my grandmother, who was born in the 1920s and yet had a third-grade education, but was somebody who read everything that could come through her hands. Leadership to me and my role models can be at any corner at any moment. So while we are driven to those big names, we also have to recognize that women leaders have been in our lives at various iterations, and they come in many names, with many names.
You have not let race or your gender interrupt you from breaking through to the glass ceiling. Now, do you feel more pressure being a Latina female CEO?
Yes, because what drives me is to make sure that I am not the only one that gets through that glass ceiling. What drives me is to make sure that we completely erase that glass ceiling. And unfortunately, we have shattered the glass ceiling but it's still there. We can still see the cracks, and we still feel the glass ceiling over our heads. So when we talk about breaking the glass ceiling, to me it's making sure that first, I'm not the only one that gets through it, that I can actually bring thousands of other women through it. And as a Latina, that I am not put into a category just because of my name or my race or my gender. It's inescapable. I mean, my name is Alejandra Castillo. It's nothing else. I look in the mirror every day and I know I'm a Latina and I'm proud of it. But I don't want that to be my only determining factor or the factor that puts me behind. As many women, we do carry that reminder that we have to work twice as hard to get just halfway through the journey. But I'm eager to do it if I know that the institutional memory and legacy that I leave behind is one that perhaps 50 years from now somebody can say, you know, I was able to get here because of the work of many others. So I'm thankful for that.
How do you lead in a time of crisis? And can you share an example with us?
Sure. What better example than today? I really believe we are in a time of crisis. As somebody who works in the Washington, D.C. environment, it can be very, we can find ourselves feeling like we are in a constant barrage of tweet attacks, or a constant barrage of new things coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So it is a moment of crisis because we're trying to just hold the line. We're just trying to make sure that we don't reverse the accomplishments that we have been able to secure for women and girls, whether it's on the health issues, whether it's on education, on workplace. So how do we manage under this time of crisis? It's very easy to think that we have to respond to just everything at every moment. And my attitude is sometimes we have to take a moment, take a breath, assess the situation, and not try to always be on defensive, but to try to move ourselves to an offensive strategy where we can actually start to bring back the conversation on how do we build for women and girls. I'm afraid that in this moment of crisis where we're trying to respond to just everything that is coming our way, we can die from friendly fire. And I'm trying to get my team to understand that we have to work collaboratively with others. Sometimes there are organizations that are stronger in a particular issue, and we need to let them be the one driving the response. When it comes to the YWCA, we have some moments of strengths that we are going to be leading that conversation. So we're ready. Our communication strategy is ready. Our advocacy strategy is ready. I'm definitely ready because I want to make sure that our voice as the YWCA-USA is stronger at the national level, but that we can also make sure that we send to our organization a voice of confidence that we are being diligent and that we are at the forefront of leading this change so that it is a productive change and not a change of reversing our gains.
What do you think are the 3 imperatives needed in becoming an effective leader in the digital age?
One is making sure that cooperation and collaboration. I can't stress that enough. The digital age can give you a false understanding that you are it. And I think that when we work collaboratively with others, that digital platform actually provides us with a synergistic and a multiplier effect. So I'm very big on collaboration and cooperation with others. Secondly, you need a team that is nimble and that is open for change, open to bring in change, and to understand that we want to test new ideas and new concepts. So the digital age allows us for that, and for us to fail and to regroup and do new things. But the digital age also allows us for making sure that our message reaches individuals that perhaps traditionally they could not have been reached. Communities, we know that communities of color disproportionately use more social media than others. So we are at an advantage to be able to reach various cohorts of the population, different age groups, different...
Yeah, so age group, is there a certain cutoff, say women that are 65 or older, are they still heavily, are you reaching them through social media?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We are reaching them through social media. We are engaging, for example, AARP in a conversation of how do we reach women over 50? How do we service them more? So we're looking at the entire spectrum of women, not just in terms of age, but also in terms of where they are at in life. We know that young women, college-age women, young family-age women have different needs. So we want to make sure that we're reaching them through this digital age, but that we're also leveraging technology and innovation to make sure, again, that we bring them education, employment, and entrepreneurship to their doorsteps. So I'm excited about the digital age. It's a wonderful democratizer, as I say.
What is your view of representation and the status of women in senior leadership positions in organizations and governments across the world? If you could touch on that.
Sure. I really believe that we still have a lot of work to do, whether it's in the corporate rooms or in the highest levels of government. I was, in terms of equivalency, I served as a senior executive service officer for the federal government. That's your C-suite level of the federal government. And the SES rank, as we call it, acronyms in government, the SES rank in government still leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to women and minorities. This is an issue that government can definitely address. So when you're looking at the government space, when you're looking at the private sector space and the nonprofit, we are still woefully underrepresented. And what are the solutions? The solution is making sure that we're grooming more women to take on these positions. For example, even though I just started this position, I'm still thinking about succession plan. I want to make sure that I am grooming the next cohort of leaders to take on the YWCA. Because a good leader, in my view, is somebody who can not just stay in their position, but most importantly, can understand that even when they depart, most importantly, when they depart, the organization will continue to thrive. So making sure that succession planning is embedded in our plan is important to me, because that's the only way that we're going to pull up more women to be in those C-suite, in those positions of power. And I talk about it when I go to my corporate funders. What is your investment in women in terms of making sure that they're not just at the C-suite, but that they're also in the boardrooms? So this is a conversation that I'm trying to drive, and I'm not giving them a pass. You know, I'm a good New Yorker, so I will be very outspoken about this, because it's the only way we're going to change the conversation and to bring diversity into every walk of life.
Now, there's a wide gap in the percentage of men versus women in the workforce. Do you think part of the reason is that people fail to realize that the kind of value and things that women can actually bring to the table that is being overlooked?
I think there's some things that are overlooked. I think that there's still some structural challenges that we must try to break down. So let's talk about the structural challenges. Structural challenges in terms of what is measured as performance. You know, we still look at soft management skills, which is a term that I cringe. Women are much stronger when it comes to team building and making sure that a team is cohesive. Are those type of skills remunerated in the same way that a strong manager is seen, which is something men bring to the table? I want to make sure that metrics of performance bring in those type of skills where women overperform. So there's some structural issues about meetings and who's at the meeting and the time. Sometimes meetings can be called at 7 a.m. Well, guess what? Women sometimes are the ones that have to drop off the kids. These are small things that sometimes can be perceived as little matters, but they also create structural barriers for when women can be active and participate. And then there are other issues that I also think women can do much better at, and that's owning their voice, being more willing to showcase the product that they have, their accomplishments, making sure that it's not just something that they should know. And sometimes you have to be your best advocate. And then the other thing is you have to create advocates around you as well, so that when you're not there, people can speak up about what the work that you've done. So there's a lot of nuances, but there are also structural issues that I think women in the workplace must also address. And I think it's a conversation that I'd love to bring to the YWCA. What better place than the YWCA to make sure that we are bringing that confidence level to women?
What are some of the ways to increase and strengthen the inclusion of women in the workforce?
Some people have referred to kind of the European model where there is quota. In the US, we've kind of shied away from that, from the quota. And I don't think that it's a quota issue at all. I think it is a cultural issue to understand what women bring to the table, the diversity of thought, of experience that we can bring to the table. And it's really making sure that we hold companies, nonprofits, government accountable to making sure that this is something that we will ask for, that there's an index, not just of how much you've tried to bring women into the workplace, and that some companies allegedly can't find us. That is something we need to take away. Yeah, we need to help you find us. We are there. We come in every skill set. So we want to make sure that we're helping not just corporations and private sector, but government and nonprofit find the talent that is already there. And I'm very cautious about making sure that we want to bring talented women. I want to start from the premise women are talented. We don't need to qualify it. We just need to make sure that we're bringing those faces and names and resumes to the forefront and to every HR, so that we are not hearing the same excuse. We just can't find them. So I'm excited about that because I think it's a work that we can definitely push out, and that we can collaborate with others, whether it's Catalyst that works with women to bring them to the boardroom, or other organizations, women organizations that are out there who are also working to make this change.
The confidence gap sees women to have lower self-confidence than men when it comes to leadership, although this is not backed by, according to any specific study or research. What would your advice or tips be to female entrepreneurs and other leaders on how to face the challenges posed by this particular perception?
Sure, and I agree with you. There is no concrete research or evidence to that, but kind of anecdotally, we've come to that conclusion that there may be a confidence gap. I'll just speak on a personal note. I recognize that at moments in my life, there was a confidence gap. I wanted my superiors to just recognize my work. What I failed to understand is that managers sometimes are so busy that they just want the work done. They don't care who did it, or at times they don't know who did it. So it's up to you to become your best advocate. The other thing that I would say is it takes a village to move up the ladder. So not only do you want mentors, but you also want sponsors, individuals who know your work, who understand that you may need to break that barrier, who may give you that push, not just by confidence, but also by advocating on your behalf. So you need champions. And as women sometimes, we try to keep it all to ourselves because we have it under control. But we need others, particularly other women, to support us in this professional journey. And that's true in every walk of life. I became the mom of 2 nieces, and I had to juggle work and being a mom. I didn't have any skills as a parent. My nieces came to me as preteens, but I understood I needed a very large community. And my fellow girlfriends in the workplace were my best advocates because they knew that if I had to go for a parent-teacher conference, they had my back. And when we come back to this confidence gap, it's not just confidence managing up, it's also confidence knowing when you need help. And I read a wonderful quote one day: if you want a friend for life, ask for help. And as women, we need to ask for help to help us journey through this professional world.
What traits are needed when leading a national nonprofit organization that relies on government funding, particularly in this political climate we're in?
So I came to the YWCA-USA with a business background. And what I recognized very quickly is that we lead, as nonprofits, we lead with our heart and with our passion. And that is extraordinary. But we also have to become very savvy as to how do we position ourselves to make sure that the external world understands what our value proposition is and what their return on investment is. I use those two terms because at times I feel like I'm a salesperson. I have to go into the executive branch and perhaps work with housing and urban development to make sure that I speak to individuals at HUD who are issuing that grant so that they understand the work that the YWCA does on a daily basis to reduce domestic violence, but most importantly, to provide housing for survivors of domestic violence. And our uniqueness and how we approach the issue, because we are serving a very unique cohort of the population, meaning women, children, and families. So when I go into funders, whether they're government funders, corporate funders, or philanthropic funders, I need to make a very compelling and persuasive argument as to what is our distinguishing value proposition as an organization, so that they understand that we will deliver not just impact, but value. This is a very different narrative from how most nonprofit organizations work. And that type of narrative is something that I'm infusing into my team so that they think about going into the conversation not as a charitable organization, but as an organization that makes investments into women and girls, and an organization that can showcase social impact returns, because that's what makes the decision, that's what seals the deal at the end of the day for us to be able to garner greater funding and greater resources.
What is your advice on the importance of networking for female entrepreneurs and women in general?
Crucial. It is crucial for us as women and girls and entrepreneurs and decision makers and leaders to network, not just with one another, which is critically important, but with unlikely partners. It is surprising to me how many champions you can find when you're networking with people outside of your comfort zone. People who may take another look, a different look to who you are, to your leadership, and to the organization you represent. So for me, it's been really rewarding when I am able to go out and do a more external facing stakeholder engagement approach and really expand our comfort zone. Yes, we work with other organizations that work in the women and girls space. Yes, we work with other organizations that do domestic violence work. And yes, we work with other organizations that do advocacy. But I want to work with organizations like a Boeing, like an Amazon, like a Starbucks. Corporations that are really at the cutting edge, that have changed the environment, but may not necessarily understand how they should redesign their philanthropic giving. I want to partner with other businesses because what better consumer than women? But I want to make sure that that relationship is one of respect and not just based on consumerism, but one that is based because they understand that women continue to be economic decision makers in their household and in their communities. So again, changing the narrative of how we engage women and girls is important to me, and making sure that our value proposition is always at the forefront.
Is work-life balance a myth or a reality?
It's a pursuit. At times, from a personal note, I feel like I have work-life balance. At times, I feel it's very elusive. I think it's a continuous pursuit because Work can always creep in and take over, and life also can intervene in many ways. There are moments in life where you may have more flexibility to dedicate to your workplace, and there are moments in life where you must put the workplace on hold for a while you attend to your family. I referenced that I became a mom of 2 teenagers overnight, and that required me to reassess how much time I could dedicate to work. And my main priority became making sure that these 2 girls were strong, healthy, and resilient. And that was a beautiful project that I'm very proud of. Now they're both in college, and I am an empty nester again. So now I have the flexibility to go back into a beautiful project, which is the YWCA-USA, and dedicate my entire being. Now, at times, I need to understand that health is important. So finding that balance is a constant pursuit. And at times, it will be something that you need to reassess on a personal note. So I'm hopeful that someday we will find that balance that works for us. And there's no magic bullet, and there's no perfect formula. So that pursuit has to be an ongoing conversation with oneself as well as with your employer.
So you say you did step back when you were raising your nieces. Did that have a negative impact on your career trajectory? As they say, women tend to step out of the workforce, then get back in, and that will in turn affect our earnings potential. Did you find that happening?
What I found was that I needed to definitely spend time and energy creating a support system so that I didn't have to sacrifice so much of the workplace. And what I understood was that I then also became much more able to delegate. And that was a wonderful realization. As women, sometimes we want to do it all. We want to have some control of it all. And what I realized that the power really lies on how well you can delegate, trusting that others will come to the fold and that they will do their best. So when I was able to create that support system, I actually found myself thriving in both places and finding some level of satisfaction in both arenas. And that was a very surprising takeaway. But it definitely was I was able to achieve that only because I called in the Calgary. Mm-hmm. I called in all of my friends, and I was not ashamed to ask for help. And I was not ashamed to understand that I was not going to reach perfection, that I was going to reach a level of accomplishment that was very good, and at times good enough. So sometimes you have to recalibrate your own metrics, particularly when you're a type A personality like I am. So that was a wonderful experience because I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about my leadership style. And now I'm hoping that I'm bringing that to the YWCA in this new capacity.
What advice would you give to young people who want to get involved in social justice and make a difference as you have?
Start locally. Start wherever you are, whether it's in your neighborhood, in your town. Go and attend a town hall meeting, volunteer for a campaign, whether it's a campaign for a dog catcher. It does not matter. Just do it and volunteer. Some folks will tell me, well, I don't have enough time. You have enough time. Trust me. You can find that extra hour, maybe on the weekends, maybe phone banking for a nonprofit organization, after hours. And then take someone along. Take someone along that journey. Don't do it by yourself. Find a friend who wants to also volunteer. But start locally. I think that's the first beginning. And then don't be afraid to then move into larger projects, whether it's a state campaign or a state nonprofit. And eventually, if you want, come to Washington. I really think that it's unfortunate how Washington, D.C. has been maligned. There are some extraordinary people that work in government, that work in Congress, that are at nonprofits, who have a mission, who are driven by wanting to make it a better tomorrow for our population. So don't succumb to this negative attitude of D.C. I've lived in Washington, D.C. for 25 years, and I've had amazing experiences trying to move the needle, whatever that means for you. But there are causes that are beyond us, that really tap into our passions, and that really are transformative. So find whatever that is, whatever amount of time you can dedicate. There's no judgment, whether it's 1 hour or a lifetime. Just get involved.
What advice would you give to women to help them empower themselves in our divisive country?
It is a challenging time that we're living in, but I want to find the hope. And the hope is really when I find women who are so invested into their communities. They are invested in changing one life at a time. If we take this crisis as a whole, it is daunting and overwhelming. I am a big believer that when you have a big problem, the best way to solve it is taking it into smaller morsels. And for women, start with yourself. Learn something. Every year, try to find something that you can learn. Read another book. If you're reading 3 books a year, read a 4th one. Go to any free workshop that you may find, whether it's online or in your community. Go to your library. Sit in a town hall meeting. Ask questions. Be inquisitive. You'd be surprised how these small steps can really start to expand your knowledge, your confidence, your curiosity, and then find a friend that can walk through that journey with you, so that they will hold you accountable to making sure that you're learning something. Learn a new skill. Ask your employer, can you take on a new project? Or can you listen in on a meeting? I think there's a lot of things that we as women can do. And I'm also encouraging women to take on a younger woman, be a mentor. Or be a mentor to somebody who is perhaps of a different generation, who wants to learn social media. Be a mentor. I always say that if you don't have a millennial mentor, you should get one. There's a lot to be said about intergenerational learning. So mentors, again, can come in different sizes and shapes. And I think as women, we need to also trust one another and journey together. Because I'm tired of the unfortunate statement that I hear from women who say, my worst boss was a woman. I've had amazing women bosses, and I want that experience to be replicated. So I think there's a lot that we can do, both in the workplace as well as in our communities, to change the way women support one another.
Are you hopeful for the future of the YWCA-USA, and what's that one goal that you're going to break through?
I am ecstatic about the future of the YWCA-USA. I see the YWCA-USA as this unbelievable organization that has a 160 years of history, but also has 160 years more of being at the forefront of the conversation of women and girls in the U.S. But not just the conversation, we just don't talk, we actually do. And I invite individuals watching this interview to visit your local YWCA, to volunteer for your local YWCA, to bring new ideas and to bring new resources. If you have never contributed to the YWCA, think about making that first-time contribution. But more importantly, we need people who are in our cause, whether it's to eliminate racism, to provide safety and security for women, to empower women. Those 3 causes are just amazing. And we need those three causes now more than ever. So the future of the YWCA, in my eyes, and I think in the eyes of so many, is that it is tremendously promising. We are at a growth opportunity, and we are at an opportunity of growth and expansion. And we are definitely a change agent. And I'm very proud of the many women who lead YWCAs around the country, and the women and men who work at YWCAs, as well as the people we serve. It will move your heart. I went to San Jose, to our YWCA there, and received a letter from a 7-year-old young boy who said in his letter how he dreads leaving the after-school program of the YWCA. For him, those are the best hours of the day. If that doesn't move you in terms of hope, I don't know what will. So even when we find ourselves in a moment of crises as a nation, or in daunting hours, I think if you go to the YWCA, you will definitely be uplifted by the hope and the future that we are nurturing and growing in our space. So I'm excited, and I know that from this point, it's just upward.
Alejandra Castillo, a pleasure having you here. Best of luck in your new job, and thank you so much for coming out from DC to talk with us today.
This was truly a delight. Thank you for this.
And that does it for this edition of Sarder TV. We hope you enjoyed and learned something new today. Until next time, I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick. Thanks for watching.